Opinions now from Russell Brown over at publicaddress.net. Also, the Media 7 show on TVNZ7 does the Hard News blog, and he's been blogging a lot this week. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning.
Hard to know where to start, really.
There has been quite a lot of news, hasn't there?
Yeah, indeed. Let's start off with your experience on Friday night, asking where are all the foreigners at the moment?
Yeah, exactly. And it's become completely clear that the Rugby World Cup is not delivering the hospitality bonanza that had been predicted. But I actually don't think that the sceptics can really claim to be right either, because what's happened is something no one predicted, is that New Zealanders are staying home as well.
Oh, are we?
Yes. If you talk to like Ponsonby Road bar and restaurant owners, even Kingsland during the week, and especially to taxi drivers, they're in despair. For whatever reason, and it's not quite clear, not only have the visiting fans not spent much time or money in the city, particularly Auckland, but we've all stayed home too.
Do you think, because we were warned that stuff is going to be really busy, so it's best we don't go out, because you probably won't get a bite to eat anywhere?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and especially with all the disaster news around the opening day, I think that had an impact on people's perceptions of where it was safe to go, basically, because right from that, if you look at Kingsland, it died off there after the second weekend, where there was supposedly it was an apocalyptic landscape. Yeah. And people got scared and decided not to go out.
So
basically,
we blame the media for this one?
To some extent, I think. But I do think, as I said, I think that there's one of the fascinating things about this whole event is the difficulty of predicting crowd behaviour. People came in their hordes, in their tens of thousands, to the opening night down at the Auckland waterfront, and I don't think anyone quite predicted those numbers. And yet, on the other hand, they're not turning up at other times.
Yeah.
But I think possibly, it was interesting. Jock Phillips, the historian who's touring around the country during the Rugby World Cup, was on Media 7 last week. Yeah. And he said his take on it was that this was quite a different crowd from the 2005 Lions tour, where they had been British fans, mostly pretty well heeled, and they had in fact spent lots of money. And I checked this with the taxi driver I was talking to. He said, "Yeah, that was great. It was, he made lots of money then. Now he's, as he put it to me, where are the foreigners?"
And the opportunity now has really gone, hasn't it? Yeah.
This is pretty much it. I think there'll be some fairly grim reckoning. Obviously, there's a few places that have done really well, and I think the event itself has worked in a public context. But if you were in hospitality and you were planning on making a lot of money out of the Rugby World Cup, you have almost certainly been disappointed.
As we always thought, though, there would be some kind of terrible hangover after the World Cup. Yeah,
and that's entirely likely as well. Yeah. It's hard to believe it's not far off finishing.
No.
2 weekends to go.
Blink and you'll miss it. Let's move on to another topic. Let's talk about Bomber and his so-called banning from Radio New Zealand. Yeah,
this was a dreadfully handled episode. It's hard to know quite why they handled it the way they did. I mean, as I wrote in the blog, I would have had a word with Bomber about the style of his commentary. I mean, it's a slot on Jim Mora's show, on the panel, where the panellists get to express their thoughts about a current issue. And Bomber went on for about 2 minutes reading verbatim the text of his most recent blog post. And I think that's using the show as a megaphone, and I wouldn't let someone do it if I was producing or presenting. But that's word in the air territory, and it was a fairly forthright bit of comment. It was full of hyperbole and bombast. But what John Howson did next, in sending an email around to all the staff saying that Bomber had been removed from the show, I think I can't understand why they would handle it that way. And he's normally a pretty level-headed chap, John Howson. Way back when I did Media Watch on National Radio, we found him pretty good to deal with. And that wasn't the case with everyone there. So it's a pretty silly episode.
But it raises questions of balance, though, when there are commentators from the other end of the political spectrum who still are on there and sometimes say outrageous stuff.
Yes, well, Matthew Hooton's the one. He occasionally loses his composure and says some quite dreadful things on the radio. But also, 2 weeks ago on the panel, the Mad Butcher got time and space to deliver pretty much a love letter to John Key.
Yeah.
And the impression that Radio New Zealand has managed to create is that it's acceptable to praise the Prime Minister but not to criticise him. And that may not have been what they intended, but it has not been their finest hour. Apparently now they've clarified, and it is not a lifetime ban, but that was certainly the impression that Wammo was given.
Do they have the fear over there at Radio New Zealand? Because they've always been seen, at least by the National Party, to be sympathetic to the left for some reason, and now they're trying to overcompensate the other way.
Yeah, and they have been cautious, and in some respects rightly so, as a public broadcaster, for a long time. When we used to do Off the Wire, the comedy news quiz show, it was often hard getting jokes through the cardigan wearers. So it's not exactly new that they're cautious about what goes to air, and also cautious during election campaigns. Although, hey, we've got an election campaign on, if you hadn't noticed.
Yeah, indeed.
It's a little hard to notice at times. So, yeah.
Well, John Key was hammering in hoardings yesterday.
What's that?
John Key was hammering in hoardings yesterday.
Oh, good on him. I actually think their new billboards are pretty clever. They're very straightforward, and very much oriented on safe pair of hands type territory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could argue whether they're justified in making that claim, but I think it's pretty smart, that they haven't gone for anything, that there's no iwi kiwi billboards this time. These are very, very straightforward, safe pair of hands, rebuilding Christchurch, blah, blah, blah.
What tactic do you think Labour should use? Should they be putting the fear up people?
It's hard to say, because most of what they've tried so far hasn't worked. I mean, targeting John Key might have seemed like a good idea, but the guy's indestructible.
Well, the Teflon does seem to be rubbing off this week.
Yes, yeah, and his behaviour this week has not at all been good, frankly. But it doesn't really seem to make much of an impact on his popularity.
Interesting talking to Russell Norman this morning. He is pinning not, of course, the grounding of RENA, but the aftermath on the government. He says this is the government's fault. They had the opportunity last week to sort this out.
Yeah, and I think he may have a point. It's been a pretty bizarre 3 years for disasters, but it does appear that had they acted with more dispatch, had they gotten in there in those first 5 clear days, then we might not be facing the hideous prospect that we are. And I would expect the Greens to make that point very strongly. Maybe, but I don't know. I don't know whether people are listening at the moment, frankly.
They're not, are they?
No.
No, they're just not. I don't know. We seem to be a part of a very small club.
Yes, indeed. Hey, one thing I have to mention is the We Only Get One Chance website. weonlygetonechance.co.nz, which has been put up by Heart of the City. And it's pretty amazing that it's a business group that's waving the red flag on planning decisions that provide for more commercial space.
Yeah.
But it's kind of horrifying that the draft plan for Auckland calls for tall buildings to be built at Wynyard Quarter, where the children's playground is now. So we've just got this thing, and now we're facing draft plans that would wreck it, basically.
How weird. I thought that this was an area put out there for the public to enjoy, with a few businesses there, like restaurants and stuff, but it was ours.
Yeah, apparently not.
Oh.
And I can recall this when Wynyard Quarter opened. There was some talk that there were yet to be hard decisions made over planning permission for tall buildings and that sort of thing. And maybe you can let taller buildings be built further back towards Victoria Park, but the idea of of wrecking that whole space.
Yeah.
It is. It's astonishing, and it's really hard to see who thought that was a good idea. I mean, the quid pro quo is that as the tanks out the very end of the point get removed, there's a new park built there.
Right.
But hey, this is our only real human space on the waterfront. We need to be a little more careful with it than this. And I think it's really disappointing that that the chief executive of Waterfront Auckland, who are responsible for this, as appointed by Rodney Hyde, won't even discuss it. He refused to comment to the Herald. So I really think a bit of a fuss needs to be made about this.
Nuts.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy.
All right.
Anyway, that's weonlygetonechance.co.nz. Interesting that it's a business group doing it, but good on them.
Okay, we'll check that out. Thanks very much, Russell.
Righto.
Cheers. Russell Brown at publicaddress.net as well, Media 7 Show, TVNZ 7.